Square Ball Podcast.
Welcome to the show. This one is brought to you in association with West Yorkshire Electrical, who not only do electricals, they also do roofs, and that's because they do solar panels, specialists in renewables, fully accredited. If it's got wires in it, what will they do, Michael?
Work with it.
Yep, not just pull them out, but they'll put them back in as well.
Oh, I've got solar panels. They've not been working very well today.
Why is that?
It's really dark.
Right.
And horrible outside. They're working well the other day.
Right.
So, yeah, get some of them for when it's sunny.
Yes.
That's my advice.
The roofing team at West Yorkshire Electrical, dedicated roofing team, will put your roof back in smashing order.
That does need doing, actually, because it is raining quite a bit.
Quite important.
Yeah.
wyelectrical.co.uk for details there. You can find them on all your social platforms as well. Phil Hay.
What's up?
Let's do some hot playoff chat then, shall we?
Yeah.
Just the one show this week because, Sunday, Thursday, and there's nothing else really to talk about, is there, at all, besides... It's kind of like the parameters have all narrowed into all I'm thinking about while I'm awake is playoffs.
Yeah, totally. You were telling me beforehand you've been doing a quiz about all the goal scorers from the playoffs.
Yes, you can find that on this week's member show, by the way.
Yeah, good advertising. I've been thinking about those games a lot as well.
Right.
Not particularly pleasant thoughts, it has to be said. But I was one of, I think, quite a lot of people who was relatively happy coming away from Norwich with 0-0. I think the biggest thing about it was just a defensive reset, or a reset of the problems that had been developing in the structure of the team. It was kind of funny because Farker had said beforehand, look, we'll not go there and do anything different. Don't expect us to change anything significant. And then lo and behold, you had Archie Gray in at 10, although I think to judge by the system, it was more of an attempt to put three in the centre of midfield. But it definitely worked in terms of getting rid of those gaps that were there against Southampton and were really problematic against Southampton. And defensively, the team certainly looked more like themselves, more like they had done since the switch to Ampadu and Rodon, and more like they had done prior to the end of the international break, and certainly better than they had been away at QPR. I sort of felt like Farker was never going to go there and take any big risks, which he definitely didn't. And I assumed he'd be happy afterwards. He sounded pretty happy afterwards. It could have gone a lot worse.
Yeah, I noticed the passing lanes, as they call them. The cool kids call them, don't they, these days? That was all getting closed off. We were stopping them doing a lot of the build-up play that I think they did in the first half in the game down there in the league earlier in the season. And at Elland Road, they played a lot of football as well, didn't they? And all that seemed to just stop. So I think that's to our credit, given what we'd witnessed in recent weeks. Yeah,
massively. And it became really sort of packed and congested in the centre of the pitch, which meant that Norwich were going to have to go down either side. And I think they quite like to do that. And in the first half, I was certainly looking at Firpo tucking in a lot, and the amount of room that Spacey was getting on the right to Stacey was getting on the right to go forward, and wondering if that was going to be a problem. And I think it was fair to say that Norwich had the better of the first half without having much of anything in the way of chances. I thought Leeds had the better chances across the game, but in the second half it was very much Leeds in control. It was one-way traffic without it being like a motorway. It was a little bit ponderous. It was a little bit low risk, to say the least. But I think that was deliberate again.
A 40-mile-an-hour dual carriageway.
Yeah, pretty much, on which nobody was ever likely to get wiped out. And I don't know, how many playoff games have you seen semi-final first legs like that, where nobody gambles too much, nobody wants to lose it in that stage? I felt like the team selection was a little bit about that from Farker, that having seen what went on at QPR and also against Southampton, there was the risk that actually it could get away from you at Carrow Road, particularly with the way their crowd were really good to begin with. But I didn't feel like Norwich were able to properly tap into that, with really big chances early on or really, really concerted pressure. Leeds were kind of able to dampen it pretty quickly.
Is that to our credit then?
Very much so.
Not us personally, I meant the team.
Yeah, no, I don't think we can take any credit for it. But
I was sat watching it.
I tweeted to say it could be fun in games early on here, because it was good. The atmosphere was really quite heated. But it didn't get going for them in the way that they wanted. And yes, they had the better of the first half, but I still think, the chance for Rutter and the one for Byram in the second half, both swinging and missing, were the biggest of the game. There was that one for Sarah, although I thought Norwich were a mile offside in the build-up to that. And obviously the header for Sargent that came off his shoulder was a good opening, and should have done more with it. But it felt like a 0-0 game, and it did feel like it was going to tee it up for Thursday at Elland Road.
Have you seen the scouting camera angle of that goal yet?
No. But as it happened, I was sat right in line with that as it all occurred, and I thought it was offside personally. And having
Why
seen
do you hate Leeds, Phil?
Well, having seen the replay, I can see that it's a little bit on the tight side. But the flag went up, so there's very little option for the referee but to blow. It wasn't as if Ruta didn't chase the ball, so you couldn't say he was inactive. He definitely wasn't. He didn't touch the ball, but he was right there in the thick of it. I thought it was a slightly strange hill for Farke to choose to die on afterwards, that particular decision. I'm definitely in the camp that thinks Leeds have had the bigger decisions, or the kind of key decisions, have gone against Leeds more this season, or you could say the wrong decisions, than they have for them. It's not a clear picture. There was the Leicester goal at 1-0, which would have stood if you'd had VAR. There was the Nonto goal at Middlesbrough that was offside, but to balance that out, you could pick out loads of incidents, like, for example, Peltier's challenge down at Rotherham, which should definitely have been a penalty, and there have been others, Millwall being another instance. Farke was saying afterwards he's got 12 letters of apology at home, about decisions. He definitely doesn't have 12 letters of apology, because it's not the way the PGMOL work. They review decisions, key decisions, and they will come back and say, that could have gone the other way. They will, on occasions, come back and say, yes, that should probably have been different. On very rare occasions, they will apologise, like, for example, to Liverpool after what went on at Tottenham, because there was simply no excusing that. But it's not the case that every time something goes against Leeds, they write to Farke saying, really sorry, that shouldn't have happened. That's just not how they operate. But there have been plenty of occasions this season where it's been contentious.
Mark Clattenburg's out of a job, isn't he?
He is, yeah. Should get him in as referee analyst.
On here?
Yeah, why not?
For mine, Leeds. I don't look at that offside goal and feel like a huge injustice was not done.
No.
I'm more concerned by the failure to give the penalty.
Well, funnily enough, Farke said afterwards...
And even then, I'm not 100% sure. It was definitely a foul. But
he thought it was absolutely a foul, and it was weird not to give it. And I don't know, you find yourself thinking, was the referee unsure about whether that was inside or outside, and in the interests of not making a glaring error, as in giving a penalty when it shouldn't have been, particularly when the game's 0-0. Has he just kind of frozen a little bit? It's really difficult to tell.
It was too early, is what we concluded on the match ball, wasn't it? It felt like it was too early for him to make a big call like that when he should have done. I agree.
I think it should probably have been a free kick, though.
I think you could say, just as you were saying there, Phil, frozen is probably a good way to describe it.
I think it probably was just about outside.
He could have covered his own arse, though, by giving the free kick, couldn't he?
Yeah,
and said, no, it's a foul, but it was outside.
And I wasn't
the box.
sure, and it was tight. Yeah, it was like that Hummels foul in the Champions League. That was
Phil going on
tight.
About the Champions League.
Oh, yeah,
again.
here you go.
Let me hang on a second.
Newsletter fodder.
Yeah, I was going to say, today's newsletter's just, Man City. Oh, super, that's great.
Yeah, I did manage to get Leeds in there, though, a couple of days ago.
You did, you were talking about Jesse
Every
Marsh,
opportunity,
right?
same as Hearts.
Should we talk about Bentancur's strop?
Kicking the chair in, yeah. It was weird, wasn't it?
And there'll be those heated chairs as well, I dare say. So not
expensive.
Michael's eyebrows have raised there.
There's definitely no money down at Spurs. If you go to that stadium, drop into bits. Where did you stand on the whole support Spurs or not support Spurs if you are a fan of the club last night? Because I thought it was dead interesting that Postecoglou basically said afterwards, having in the build-up kind of gone, it's really kind of parochial and petty, saying, we don't want our rivals to win the title. Having said after the game, I think I've misjudged that slightly, given the atmosphere and everything else. What would you guys have done?
We spoke about it quite extensively, actually, on Propaganda this week, so you can go back and check that out if you want to hear the full thing. But the main thrust of it was Leeds against Arsenal, 1999.
Yeah,
Jimmy Hasselbank scores, hands the title to Man United. It was brilliant. We loved it. And so I would have gone for exactly the same thing. You could, if we had lost that game to Arsenal, you'd have gone, well, that's fine.
But yeah, the scenes of people actually celebrating was
especially as it came at the cost of their own Champions League place. But
equally, I feel like they were also very performative, because people know there are cameras there, and there are within that clip you can see loads of people filming on phones, and I don't know, it felt very, this is old man chatting about cloud stuff, very Premier League social media era performative stuff is how it felt.
I sort of think Schadenfreude is fun with anybody, so you could easily have aimed it at City last night as Arsenal, but there we go. But no, I like you, I was really surprised that Farke got into the offside in the way that he did. I wasn't expecting him to have a big go at that, because particularly in the moment when it got ruled out, I just kind of thought, well, yeah, no, that seems reasonable. The non-to foul, yeah, definitely close, but even Farkas said he thought that was just outside. It was really, really borderline. But 0-0 was about right, wasn't it? As I say, there was the swing and miss from Rutter, who, I don't know, in his own way is kind of needing a bit of an epiphany in the way that Pirro does. You know, it just hasn't been in form since that hernia up. And then the swing and miss from Byron, which was exactly the sort of situation where you wanted Somerville, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's your classic full-back's shot at goal, that wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, more of a kind of centre-back's swing, that. But yeah, because some full-backs are very good at finishing. But yeah, it was... And you know, in the build-up to it, he'd positioned himself perfectly. You know, he timed his run, he'd dropped off just to get himself into space, and then, yeah, swing miss.
Do you think there's any possibility that Rutter is dropped?
Great question, because the system made sense to me at Norwich on the basis that it hadn't worked with Pirro in the previous games where he'd started. There'd been big issues with the midfield against Southampton, and whether or not you kind of agree with Farke that they were taking bigger risks, it kind of had to be addressed. But more to the point, defensively, they just hadn't looked anywhere near as sound in the last month of the season as they had done previously. So it almost seemed logical, really, to put Archie Gray in there and to tighten things up, which it definitely did. The thing is it's easier to play safe and be, not negative, but, you know, be conservative with a small C away from home in the playoffs, particularly in the first leg. In the second leg, somebody's got to win it. You know, somebody has got to win this now, Leeds or Norwich. So do you put Pirro in for Rutter? Do you carry on with Rutter on the basis that, you know, if he has a really good game and turns it on, then he could well be decisive? Because Bamford isn't going to be fit. So there's going to have to be a choice then, and it doesn't feel like at any stage it's going to be Matteo Joseph unless he surprises us.
A couple of things I was going to say. It felt like that formation was crying out for a number 9. Sign a striker? Should we start that one again? Just sign a striker? Or play one?
Bamford would be fit soon.
Don't you think though, if Bamford had been fit, he would definitely have started that game?
100%.
Yeah.
I mean, would have made more sense in that formation. I get it, actually, having Georgie there as well, because he's really good on the counter-attack, but he's just completely gone off the boil, hasn't he, post hernia up. The other thing I was going to say was this Bamford's not going to make it. I did have this, I confected this stupid idea in my mind that there's going to be a mic drop moment on Thursday night where Bamford is named in the starting 11 because Farke said in the run-up to the Norwich away leg, we're not going to change anything, then changed it.
Yeah.
And then he also said, now Bamford's out for both legs of the semi, and poof, there he is.
Calipers on his legs.
Yeah. But then
wheel him out.
But then he'll run like Forrest Gump where they just fell off, yeah.
He didn't sound like he was bluffing with Bamford, I didn't think. But then again, I suppose everything depends on how quickly you recover and what happens. It was kind of weird, wasn't it, to go from there doesn't seem to be anything wrong apart from a bit of bruising to actually it's
a classic Leeds injury.
Tendon is damaged, because you kind of thought that would have been picked up pretty quickly. So who knows? But it didn't sound or feel like that was going to be the case. So Michael's right. You know, there's definitely a decision to make. I don't know. I fall on the side of thinking that it hasn't worked with Pirro, really, for quite a while. But then I can't pretend that Rutter is in any sort of form at the moment. It just isn't quite happening for him. And as I say, I don't know whether you think differently, but there's no suggestion at all that it's going to be Matteo Joseph, and perhaps he is going to surprise us with that on Thursday. But there hasn't really been any, in the same way as, you know, with that period of everybody looking for Gelhardt to play and, you know, ahead of Tyler Roberts and everything else, people constantly thinking, could Joseph get a go? And, you know, in a similar way to Bielsa never quite going in that direction, Farke isn't showing any sign of doing it either. Joe
Gelhardt's still here, of course.
He is, yeah.
No one's shouting for him now.
No, definitely not.
I can't make up my mind whether he's going to revert back to the... I know it was something approximating a 4-2-3-1, because Archie Gray was playing that more advanced position, wasn't he, behind Rutter. I can't decide if he's going to go back to that or whether he will just go with the same starting 11 and then try and win the game maybe in the second half, which carries quite a lot of risk with it, doesn't it? Particularly, I'm thinking about, as you've been sort of tapping into recently, Michael, saying that 0-0 in that first leg is fine.
Yeah.
But 0-0 in the second leg, as that clock creeps later and later and later, the Ellen Road anxiety will start to expand and grow. And
then essentially the nearer we get to penalties, probably the happier Wagner will be in it, because he'll be thinking, well, it's a roll of the dice at this stage, and Leeds are inevitably terrible at them.
Although they would likely start to sit deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper then, wouldn't they, and protect it. So.
It's probably not coincidental that it was 0-0 in the other game too. Partly because West Brom are involved in that and tend to be better than most others at keeping it tight. But I think you'll see in both playoff games, both semi-finals, a swing now towards something more resembling chaos in both second legs. Yeah, I mean, I came away actually quite surprised by how ordinary Norwich were made to look, particularly in the second half. And I think that speaks quite highly of the way Leeds played in the second half and how much they controlled it. But I certainly felt, I think others down there watching did as well, that Leeds were playing within themselves in the second half when it came to the risks they were willing to take in the final third and around the box. There was definitely a goal in it for them on Sunday if they wanted to push it. But of course, carried the risk of getting caught in the counter and everything else. And we
were denying them space to play, weren't we? So if you start committing men forward, you leave them space in behind.
Yeah, and they do have players who are good in those circumstances as well, players with pace and actually decent amount of talent in the side. So it's a difficult one, and I think you have to be kind of pragmatic in saying that if you come out of the first leg away from home at 0-0, you're in a really good position. Wagner didn't seem unhappy, I have to say, and I think because of the way the second half went, he'll have been happy in the end to have come out of that not trailing at all. But I don't know. Is it advantage Leeds? Convention says that it is because they're
just based
coming home.
Yeah, I was going to say just based on home field advantage.
Yeah,
it is by definition an advantage, isn't it? Because you get more stuff going in your favour. Doesn't necessarily mean it'll translate into a result, but theoretically, yeah, absolutely, you'd have to say so, wouldn't you?
I mean, the weird thing is in the playoffs that I've watched. It's always happened away from home for Leeds.
Yeah.
Always. I remember the first leg of, it was before I started this but I remember the first leg of that Preston playoff and feeling after Preston went 1-0 up that could easily have run away from Leeds. And Eddie Lewis scored that free kick, but you didn't come out of that thinking that was nicely handled and that was all in hand. You came out thinking, actually, as much as we'll joke about what Billy Davies said, it did feel a bit like that. It felt like good night for Preston.
And look at the Carlisle one as well.
Great example as well. And then obviously Derby, where Leeds looked, as they had against Derby through the season, looked a kind of class apart or a level above. And then, lo and behold, there it goes.
Just to compare kind of normal season games with playoff games, I didn't feel like this one resembled either of the league games at all.
No.
It was almost weird to see it play out, having already watched this game twice this season.
I was going to say, atmosphere-wise, just to go back to what you were saying before about how that crowd started off quite lively. I mean, I was never a fan, when we were in that bloody awful Premier League thing, never a fan of those 2:00 Sunday kickoffs, because it always just felt flatter and that slightly earlier start, and people have got to go to work on Monday, so it kind of tempers the social aspect of it, shall we say. And it always felt that little bit flatter in Ellen Road. And same with like the Saturday lunchtime kickoffs. It feels a bit too early. You kind of almost fall out of bed, have your breakfast, and then set off, don't you? It just never feels quite right.
Thursday night, on the other hand.
However, I was going to say, and the league fixture against Norwich earlier in the season was very, very lively, wasn't it? Atmosphere-wise, and it got a bit wild out in the away game in the league. Earlier in the season, just because of the amount of goals, the back and forth. But you're absolutely right. Yeah, it started lively on Sunday because they'd kind of hyped it up, hadn't they, at Norwich? But then as Leeds kind of stifled them and the game became that sort of cat and mouse thing, and then Leeds took control, it felt like a Sunday lunchtime kickoff by the end, didn't it?
And there were large periods of possession in the game at Ellen Road earlier in the season for Norwich, where they were passing it around. They didn't create a great deal, but also we couldn't get it off them.
It frustrated the crowd.
And there was never actually a bit like that at the weekend. There was never a period where I was thinking, we need to get a grip of this one again. I know the first half you could maybe argue Norwich had the better of it, but there was not a lot in it, I didn't think.
It was one of those weird games where, because you're invested in it and there's something riding on it, it feels massively tense. But I think if you're a neutral watching, you could quite easily have got bored with that game quite early on. It's funny, somebody was saying to me, someone I know who supports Arsenal was saying about the game against Man United at the weekend, how tense they were towards the end. And from listening to it on the radio, because I was driving home from Norwich, it must have been tense because it was 1-0, but it didn't sound like Arsenal were going to concede at any point. And
I was watching it, it was like wallpaper.
Yeah, I was going to say, if I had been watching that at home, I suspect I'd have been distracted and sort of drifting off and catching up with bits of it, but generally letting it go by, because it doesn't matter to you. But when it does, in the way that Norwich Leeds does to everybody who has a dog in the fight, then you feel completely different about it. So it was tense because you know that one goal here or there can make all the difference. But it wasn't a great game. But that's not unusual for the first leg of playoff semi-finals.
Must admit, I did take a little bit of spiteful satisfaction in the fact that Sky's lineup of like two big playoff games, Arsenal, Man United, it's like, no.
They're your mates now, come
Now
on.
happened, really.
Barely any goals in them.
three really boring games. But do subscribe.
Am I a weirdo for actually quite looking forward to this game on Thursday?
I'm as well.
Really?
The last time you messaged me and said, I'm really looking forward to this, was
Can't remember.
QPR.
Was it?
Idiot.
About 3 years before. I might have replied and said,
bollocks.
yeah, me too, you know.
I don't feel like I did
It's an all-round abomination.
ahead of that derby
I'm
game.
going to
though.
have to fact check you now, Phil, because I'm not sure.
Yeah, go on, go back. Michael, carry on while you do a bit of investigating. I think it was April the 26th.
Right, I feel like you're lying.
Yeah, I don't feel the same as I did before that derby game.
No, I don't. I was thinking that in the car on the way in. I feel quite relaxed. Not relaxed.
Which is possibly
cocky.
just because we've been to the Premier League recently. And it
It's
was
shit.
like,
I saw somebody say on Twitter that they didn't feel as tense about this second leg as and okay, it's probably easy to say that when you're a few days out, but as they did about the second leg in 2019, because there was that fear in 2019 that if they lost, which they did, Bielsa might go, that whole framework and project might be, it might be gone up in smoke just there and then. And then there's the question of what's next. I think if you're rational and you can sort of take out the potential like doom and gloom of losing the playoffs, if that was to happen, you at least have a coach and a squad who's got them to 90 points once. And I think, without pretending that there wouldn't have to be some difficult decisions through the summer, I think you could reasonably or, kind of fairly say that they could do it again. And all the indications are that the 49ers would want Farke to have another crack. Oh, here we go.
I found the trail of WhatsApps. Yeah, so
who's right?
I don't know how you remember this. I really don't, honestly.
It's keeping receipts, isn't it?
Yeah. How do you remember stuff like this? So yeah, it was 12:34. I messaged you and I said, dare I say I'm actually looking forward to tonight? Yeah, but your reply, oh, me too, big time. These games are the best, however stressful they can be, and blah 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 blah.
Yeah.
And then 21:47, your message to me, kill me.
Oh, Christ.
the best.
Yeah.
These games are
These
the
are
best.
the best. But I have to say they are. Like, it was like that sitting down at Norwich. Once you're getting closer to kickoff, you think there's a lot of not benign football in the Championship, but there's a lot of it where it's just part of the marathon, isn't it? And you're getting through it. I think that particularly applied to that big old trek round about the southwest, Plymouth and Swansea and everything else. Whereas the days where it really, really matters, it's good until it goes wrong.
Well, yeah, this is the point I was trying to make in the embrace it as an opportunity nonsense I was spinning in the run up to all this. Is like, if you want to ever do anything in football, if you want to have good days out, there needs to be maximum jeopardy on the day, like a cup final or winning a trophy or something like that. I think we only feel safe if we are winning a division or getting promoted automatically, because the jeopardy, I suppose, doesn't necessarily have to come down to one day. It feels like you can sort of spread the risk a little bit. But really, if ever you want to achieve anything, trophies or success, you have to embrace this and kind of say, do you know what? Just ride the wave. And the risk of having the best day ever and feeling amazing is that it might also be the worst day ever.
It's the colour of it. So it adds, I think, to the season when they went up under Bielsa, that you had that wobble through January and February, and also that when Leeds came back from COVID, the first thing they did was lose down at Cardiff, just to make you think, is this all right? Where they're going from here? And then obviously that horrible game against Barnsley just to get over the line. It's a little bit like, if you think about it, everybody says that City just steamroller the Premier League, but I don't know if you watched that last night. That moment where Son goes through for Spurs, and if he scores that, it probably ends up 1-1 at full time. It's right there, isn't it? Like, that's Arsenal's title, that's City's title, that's where it is. And those are the moments that make it a ride and make it, even though they're horrible, and even though you'd sort of want to kill yourself in that moment. That's what it's all about. Otherwise, it's just a transaction, isn't it?
It's risk and reward, isn't it?
Yeah,
risk and reward. So
there's
the higher,
got to be some jeopardy in it. Otherwise, it's just strategic theatre.
But given a choice,
yeah, 10-0 on Thursday would be fine.
The lack of jeopardy on Thursday would be nice.
Yeah, well, what I was going to say,
Two first half goals, lovely stuff.
When we were talking about it, I was going to say that I think, and do you agree, and it's a fairly obvious thing to say, but an early goal for Leeds in the first 20 minutes completely frames this tie differently to one where it gets into the second half and you're thinking, are you going to make your subs? Are you going to go for this at some point? What are you going to do? A goal in that first 20 minutes means Norwich's game plan has to go out the window and they have to do something. They have to change on the night, on the fly.
Well, you would think, though, wouldn't you?
Mind you, I'm thinking back to that bloody derby for that second leg.
Yeah,
Christ.
but you would think, wouldn't you, if you were David Wagner, that you would have more than one game plan for Thursday. It would make zero sense to have one game plan that's predicated on Leeds not scoring. You need to have an alternative. In the same way...
But equally, it can't be easy to flip from A to B during a game. I mean, I know they will have spoken about it, but that's not going to change things for the players, is it? Because if they feel like the tie's getting away from them because Leeds have been absolutely hammering them for 20 minutes or whatever. No,
definitely. The psychological aspect of it. But that's the job of a coach, isn't it? To prepare. And there's no sense in preparing for a game in one way when you know that if it goes a certain way, you're going to have to change. And that applies to Farker as well. You know, that you say Norwich were to score first. Obviously, the urgency to equalise increases, but
I look forward to those 70th minute subs.
you can't do it in a way that suddenly leaves you massively open at the back and invites people like, Sarah and others to start bombing in and nicking goals on the counter. This is where you massively earn your money as a coach.
Yeah, I'm
and a player, but it's tactically you can make a difference.
Dare you admit that you've thought about Leeds being at Wembley yet?
Yep. I've had a think.
Yep.
Yeah.
Does it fill you full of dread? Sort of? Bit mixed?
Yeah. Part of me thinks the kind thing to do would be to just end it on Thursday.
Well, losing on Thursday is better than losing at Wembley.
Yeah.
But equally, winning at Wembley is better than going up in second place, I would argue.
Possibly, yeah.
Yeah, but it's the losing at Wembley side of it that feels awful.
I'm not sure. I agree it's better than going up in second place. I think it's just equally good.
No, but it's what you were saying about like the narrative aspect of the season. Like if we can look back on this, if we do go up, we can go, oh, bloody hell, didn't they put us through it towards the end for those little tinkers?
But I don't think Ipswich will be sitting going, oh, if only that was us.
No, not at all. But to have that day out at Wembley, which I only had the Charity Shield in 1992 to remember where we've done anything in what you might class as a final, and even then it doesn't really count, does it?
I have found myself thinking a little bit. Who of the other teams in the playoffs, West Brom and Southampton, who does it suit more being at Wembley? And I would suspect because of the size of the pitch and everything else, probably Southampton.
The pitch is the same size as Ellen Road. They're all the same standard FIFA UEFA size now. 105 by 68.
Are you not allowed these days to stretch it a little bit?
No, they're all the same. Yeah, like all Premier League pitches. I mean, we're in the Premier League, but all Premier League pitches have to be 105 by 68 metres unless the geography of the ground doesn't allow it. So, like, I think Fulham, for example, lack a little bit of space. Liverpool as well. Everton.
It always feels massive.
It does. I think it's just the size of the stadium. But
there probably is.
So they make them all standard 105 by 68 metres now.
Well, that kind of negates that argument. But I don't know.
Or is it yards, whichever one.
I still feel like Southampton are the danger team in that semi-final. In the same way as they must think that Leeds are the danger team in this semi-final. And it's... I mean, aside from anything else, it's going to hurt massively if it ends up being West Brom v Norwich, given the distance that they finish behind the two above them. But that's the game. That's the name of the game. Yeah, no, it is.
That's the game.
It is.
Although if it is going to be Norwich, I'd rather it was West Brom just for spite.
Yeah, I mean,
although actually, I suppose it would be
pretty much goes back to the conversation about would you have been supporting City if you were a Tottenham fan last night?
This is the thing, isn't it?
Yes.
And I will admit that I've been thinking about Wembley as well. Not necessarily the game, but there are certain little images that keep flashing around in my head. I feel like Jorginho deserves to be dancing around on Wembley to 30-odd thousand, 40,000 Leeds fans singing Leeds are falling apart again. I think that would be a magical end to a season. He deserves that. From a fully biased, tribalistic point of view, we deserve that because we've been the third best team in the division. So yeah, I think
that's inarguable. That's true.
That side of things just feels like very, very seductive as an idea to me.
But I won't go. And I was going to add this in the bit about Farker talking about VAR. I won't go as far as to say that Leicester and Ipswich didn't deserve it too, and more on the basis of the points. And I did think the argument of if VAR had given us X number of decisions, we'd have been promoted automatically was a bit of a bold one, given that there have been ample opportunities for Leeds to get themselves promoted in the last month and they haven't taken them.
Yeah. And also, again, going back to the spite angle of it, if it was, I mean, well, let's face it, this is all you're really in it for, right? As a fan, you want a lovely day out with your mates, but also you want to be able to stick two fingers up at the opposition. For example, the Southampton fans who came to Ellen Road on the final day of the season and started singing "Leeds are falling apart again," to be able to chuck that back in their faces, like that idea. I'd still rather not play them in the final. But
it's like when Derby beat us and then didn't go up. Like, I was delighted they didn't go up.
Yeah,
I have to say, I thought, good, because you don't deserve it.
Yeah.
And even the Villa went up, who would, had overspent massively, and they just bullied them out of the division as well. I thought, Frank Lampard doesn't deserve this. None of their players deserve it. I'm glad. I'm so glad that they're just stuck in the division
have you?
And also, it completely takes away all of their joy from the semi in a lot of ways, because you can go. Because I know we've got, like, the Carlisle, the Johnny House thing was brilliant.
Yeah, one of the best days ever.
But I don't really reflect on it on a regular basis, because I just go, we lost though.
Yeah.
Ultimately, it was meaningless.
Yeah.
Might as well have not scored them goals.
There's no way I can pretend I'm any less petty than that when it comes to who you support. It's definitely the case. The thing about Thursday is he talks a lot, doesn't he, Farkin, about spotlight games. And he was saying before Norwich, basically, we're really good in spotlight games, which pretty much stands up, particularly when you look at Leicester and Ipswich, but slightly less so when you look at the games against Southampton this season. I would be surprised if in his coaching career, Farker, he's had a bigger spotlight game than this one. Particularly because it is Leeds in the playoffs at Ellen Road. It's hot.
I love it.
Yeah.
I hate it and I love it.
Yeah.
Just going back to the tribalism, and this you can answer this, Michael. Probably not one for you, Phil, but have you taken like a real irrational dislike towards Russell Martin, for example?
I don't think it's irrational at all.
Now Maresca's gone, you can't unload on him.
We can manage to find historical beef with Wagner when he was getting into the touchline shenanigans with Pontus Jansson, but even that was sort of tempered by it being Gary Monk, wasn't it? But even still, you can always work an angle from somewhere, can't you? I don't know what it is.
Well-groomed fraud as opposed to bold fraud. Yeah.
But yeah, you can always find something, can't you?
Yeah, no, I think it's right. I mean, Southampton fans have hated Martin for quite a few bits of this season, haven't they?
You need to find a new Finnish club as well, don't you?
Yeah, it could be Leeds. Russell Martin, how old is he? He's 38, and look at that hair, Michael.
Wow. It's overrated, isn't it, hair?
I just don't think there can be another club in the country that have the same relationship with the playoffs. That go into it, and there's all this baggage around
Derby are
it.
the same. They've had a terrible time, haven't they?
Well, Preston, I was saying to you, I saw Grayson before the Southampton game, Simon Grayson, and he was talking about Preston's really poor record. So they do exist out there, but I'd be amazed if anybody else carries quite the same sort of emotional baggage as Leeds.
It's heightened, isn't it, with Leeds?
Yeah.
It doesn't necessarily make us any worse or better, if that's the right word.
They're just a massively emotive club. When Farker was talking about that a good few weeks back, when things were starting to go a little bit wrong towards the end of the season, he was touching on the emotion of the club. And I wrote a piece where I was saying, and he wasn't saying he was surprised by it, but I was saying if anybody who comes here, players, coaches, whatever, comes to Leeds and finds themselves caught out by how emotional a club is, then they just haven't done the homework. I mean, it's there to see, and it's there to understand if you dig into it deeply enough. And it does mean that it affects occasions like this, but sometimes it affects it in such a great way as well. Yeah, as in really positive way.
Sorry, go on. I was going to say a bit of light Googling suggests that Derby have been in the playoffs 8 times. The only time they've been promoted once was via beating West Brom in 2007. But, as I mentioned in one of the shows in recent weeks, only 1 out of 4 teams can go up. So you're about on par. You're not far off there. 2 out of 8 should be where you're at.
I think part of our angst about playoffs as well is that because of the size of club and where our sense of entitlement tells us we should be, you go into the League One and the Championship going, well, we shouldn't even be doing this. Come on.
Yeah, we should have finished second. So this is not saying this is beneath us, but this is not right.
Exactly. This is fair, absolutely fair enough that
why haven't we mess around doing this?
Norwich
again?
deserve to be in a playoff. Of course they do. Millwall, of course, are a playoff type side. Leeds United, please.
It's an extension of the campaign for 3 promotion spots. Yeah, if you get 90 points, just go up.
5 up, 5 down.
Yeah. Although I have, obviously, because we finished 3rd, decided that the more rugby league style of playoffs should be in effect here. Like, we should have gone straight through to Wembley by finishing 3rd. And then they should have extended it down to 7th. So it should be 7th goes to 6th, goes to 5th, goes to 4th, plays us in the final.
It's not an unfair argument, that, I don't think, but it's probably never going to happen, or at least it's too well established to make you think that the EFL would switch it about. The thing that I take confidence from is that I did think...
Is that because the Leeds hating bastards?
Probably, yeah. No. Well, in fact, almost certainly, yeah. The thing I take confidence from is that I did feel like you could feel the confidence returning to the players a bit on Sunday. And I don't think you should make too big a play of that, and I don't think you should assume that automatically extends to winning the second leg. But there just was a feeling of control which hadn't really been there for several weeks. And I think if they go through, Farke will be obviously very happy, but I think he'll be quite privately pleased as well with the decision just to tighten it up at Carrow Road and to, I guess, play the percentages a bit, not to feel like you had to make a point by taking big risks straight away, or to blow Norwich out of the water. But the fact with the playoffs is always that the quality of your first leg performance is totally dictated by what happens in the second leg. And if Leeds were to lose the second leg, I don't doubt at all that people will look back at Carrow Road and say we could have pushed it harder in the second half. We could have taken more risks. But if it works out on Thursday, you'll say that was actually a really sensible way to go.
But we say, don't we? We always talk about these things and judge football from a position of hindsight. Yeah.
And so, with foresight, I think that on Sunday was pretty well judged, personally.
Yeah. Just to extend Howard Wilkinson's golfing analogy, or to remind ourselves of it.
You love this golfing analogy.
Well, he's been back in the news this week, hasn't he? Because he got his OBE, and Chris Dawkes at ITV as well did a sit-down interview with him.
He's going as bold as me, Dawksy.
So it was nice to see.
I was in the same office as him at ITV.
Did he have hair as well?
So
did you have hair then?
No, but I think it may have influenced him.
You're a trendsetter.
Style guru.
I think maybe he caught it off me, if that's possible.
And the rest. Yeah. No, I was just going to say the whole trust your swing analogy is, I suppose it's to put it back in football terms, is to play your way back into form, isn't it? It's to remind yourself of what it is that you're doing. And then maybe, I don't know, like you said, the second leg will be the litmus test of whether this is true or not. But it feels like they've maybe gone down the driving range. The shots keep going off wildly, but then suddenly it just clicks back into form. They start to hit them straight.
Although we didn't because it was also a new formation and selection, wasn't it? Which actually suggests we've gone down there and tried a different grip.
There was part of me, though, that thought that if you went back through, if you were totally fair about it, and you went back through the back into March, April, and then the game against Southampton, there were quite a few teams who played pretty well against Leeds. QPR definitely did, as bad as Leeds were down there. QPR played well, passed the ball nicely. Southampton were good at Ellen Road, I thought. Coventry were impressive down there. I got a lot more from Watford, to be quite honest, than I was expecting at Vicarage Road. So I don't think it's been... Leeds definitely gone off the boil and have definitely been flatter and haven't played as well as they were before. But I don't think it was necessarily a simple run-in either.
I'm not going to chuck you under the bus now by asking you to predict what will happen.
Good.
But give me a 3-word prediction for Thursday. It doesn't have to necessarily be the match outcome, because I think that's unfair. But what's your 3-word prediction for what Thursday night's going to be like, just in general?
I'll turn up.
Michael?
Does it have to be 3 words?
Yes. I've gone for gonna be lively.
That might be underplaying it slightly, I think.
End of season.
End of season at Ellen Road, but you only had 3 words to play with rather than 5, didn't you there?
Right, road to Wembley. There you go.
Delete as appropriate. Well, there you go. Right, we'll wrap it up there then, and we'll reconvene after the weekend, shall we?
If I was going to go one word, I was going to go Clubber Lang and just go pain from the Rocky films. But God knows.
Oof, God knows.
Hopefully it'll be something to remember, but not in the way the Derby game was.
I think that's like 3 sentences, isn't it? Never mind 3 words, but we'll see. It'll be memorable.
Yes.
We'll speak to you next week.
The Square Ball Podcast.